to strike the count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swing and a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by managing editor Matthew Moreno. Matt, 2 out of 3 from the Padres so far. Could argue it should be 3 out of 3, but hey, let's stay positive to start this one off. 2 out of 3, we'll take it against the Padres.
Yeah, and both of their wins haven't been particularly close for the Dodgers, and so that's, I think, an encouraging sign. Because as much as they swept the A's, I think we were all a little curious to see how they would do against a team that sort of still has something to play for. Certainly has more talent than the A's. No disrespect, as Daniel would say, to the Oakland team, but they're obviously a young group of guys just kind of going through it right now. Yeah, I think it's weird because normally when we do this, a series is over, but it's a wraparound, kind of a quirk in the schedule, and they get back at it at Petco tomorrow for an afternoon game.
Yeah, so Dodgers win 8-2 on Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN. Pretty dominant performance. We'll chat about that here in just a moment. We'll talk about the last night's game where the bullpen had a chance to shut this one down and just couldn't get it done. But we'll also this is our weekly show where we talk about all of the stuff that has happened over the past week. So we've got a Clayton Kershaw injury update, a surprising Michael Grove injury update that none of us saw coming. We will talk about that bullpen and kind of what the plan might be moving forward for the bullpen before covering some odds and ends and, of course, getting some questions. So thank you to all those folks joining us live on YouTube, on Facebook. We greatly appreciate it. Those listening after the fact via podcast, thank you as well. But Matt, let's start right here with today's news. The Dodgers against the Padres. They open up the first game of this series with a 10-5 absolutely dominant victory. They score 8 runs in the 8th and 9th for a little bit of a come from behind. They were down 3-1 in that game. They cut it to 3-2. Then they busted open in the 8th and then tack on in the 9th. They come back the next night, and the Dodgers have a lead late in that one, a 3-1 lead of their own heading into the bottom of the 8th before Caleb Ferguson and Yency Almonte get unloaded on and give up 7 runs. So give me just sort of your overall perspective on this series. I'll say this before I ask you that. When we did a series preview, I kind of said those first 2 games with Yu Darvish and Blake Snell on the mound, I felt like the Dodgers were at a disadvantage of sorts. So for them to, I would say to some degree, be sitting here 2-1, having taken 2 out of 3 is pretty impressive. But what's been your sort of takeaway so far?
Yeah, I agree. I thought the first game was going to be not necessarily, I mean, I don't want to call it a tone setter because I know that sounds, very cliche, and that could probably apply to every series. But I did think that the first matchup was going to say a lot on how, maybe the series would potentially go. And like you said, the Dodgers are, and I saw in one of the comments as we were getting going, they're basically, a bottom of the 8th inning away from having won 3 games in a row against the Padres. And man, this Padres team, it's, you see their lineup on paper, like we put our game previews together and it includes the lineups for both teams. And, you list the names out and you see it and you think, man, like, how are they struggling so bad? Like it's almost unbelievable, but in some sense, I mean, it is still like the pod, as much as, they beat the Dodgers in the NLDS last year. And then I know that still stings for a lot of fans. Like they're still sort of the Padres. And one of the things that, I remember we discussed going into this season was how would the Padres react to the shoe sort of being on the other foot now, where you're not necessarily, the expectations aren't, hey, maybe you guys push the Dodgers and potentially steal the division. It was no, like a lot of media members were picking them to win the division flat out. And then if not, go to the World Series as well. And so, the series, this is a long-winded way of answering the series. It's kind of been a little bit of what, I kind of expected in some sense of the Dodgers just being a better team, even with, I think, some of their deficiencies and troubles and holes that didn't necessarily get fully addressed. Top to bottom, they just seem to be, just either more cohesive. Because, I mean, in terms of talent, you could probably argue the Padres have them edge there, maybe. But, it just isn't playing out that way.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out the Padres came into the series having won 5 of their last 6. So we know where they are on the season. They're a few games out of the wild card way back in the division. I mean, after today's game, the Dodgers have a 4-game lead over the Giants. The Diamondbacks are an absolute dumpster fire. They've lost now 6 in a row. The Giants just lost 2 in a row to the A's. The Padres are actually only a game and a half behind the Diamondbacks, if you can believe it, but they're 10 games out and 2 games under 500. That says way more about the Diamondbacks, who I think have lost something like 23 of their last 28 games or something ridiculous. So it's a dumpster fire in Arizona. But the point remains, the Padres came into this having won 5 of their last 6. And so for the Dodgers, this isn't a team that's been horrible. It's actually a team that seemed to be catching its stride a little bit. And you looked at the matchup on paper and you said, all right, Yu Darvish versus Bobby Miller on Friday. Miller had come in allowing 3 or more runs in 6 of his previous 7 starts. He had a 4.6 ERA in the month of July against Yu Darvish, who had been good against the Dodgers previously in May. He had 6 2/3 of 1-run ball. He had been great in 3 of his 4 starts coming into this one. So that felt like a disadvantage for the Dodgers. The Dodgers go out, they come back, come from behind, and they go and win that game. Then you get to the Saturday's game, and it was Blake Snell, who, if you hadn't looked at the numbers and been paying attention, you might be surprised to hear that Blake Snell had basically been the best pitcher in baseball for 2 months prior to that. Since May 26th, coming into the game, in 69 innings, he had allowed 5 earned runs. That's a .65 ERA. In 69 innings, he had 102 strikeouts, and he allowed just 38 hits over that stretch. So an absolutely insane run for Blake Snell, and he's going up against a TBD for the Dodgers. We figured Yarbrough would get the start. He ends up kind of being the bulk guy out of the bullpen. And what do the Dodgers do? They jump all over, and they have a chance to go ahead and win that game, but they blow it. Then you get to tonight's game, Rich Hill versus Lance Lynn. What are we going to get? Dodgers score 6 runs in the first 2 innings. So I just want to put in perspective, the Padres came into this game on a bit of a hot streak. The Dodgers stopped them in their tracks, even though it's in San Diego. And B, the Dodgers faced the 2 best arms that the Padres have and guys who had been pitching really well. They were underdogs on Friday night, and yet they come out of this still having won 2 of the 3 games. And so it's hard not to be happy about where the Dodgers are, even as we'll get into in a moment, the disappointment of Saturday's game, at least from my perspective, Matt.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. And on top of some of Blake Snell, Blake Snell pitching so well recently, he historically has done very well and given the Dodgers fits for and we saw it again in this series where they work his pitch count, they stress him, and somehow he still gets through, basically 5 innings with just 1 or 2 runs allowed. And Yu Darvish, same thing. He's somebody who there've been maybe 1 or 2 games where the Dodgers hit him pretty well, but otherwise he, ends up with 8, 9, 10 strikeouts. And so, they were in position to win both games. And so if you look at it that way, it's a little disappointing that you let one get away. But on the flip side, going into it, if you had thought, okay, we could kind of split the first 2 and then see, how things go on Sunday, you probably have to be feeling pretty good.
Yeah, let's get to that Saturday night game because I see folks in the comments talking about it, and obviously it's the hardest one to wash the taste out of your mouth with. So Michael Grove goes 1 1/3. He gives up 1 hit. He gets 4 strikeouts. I want to pause there real quick. That was an interesting move by Dave Roberts, to go to Michael Grove, who had been a starter, but the expectation was, I think Dave had even said that Grove was going to get a regular start. He strikes out 4 of the 5 batters he faces and then gets pulled. And the decision to pull him, now knowing he was injured, it didn't seem like an injury played a role in that, because it wasn't like an injury. Normally, if somebody gets pulled because of injury, it's a bit more of an ordeal. The guy's not necessarily warming in the pen. This definitely seemed premeditated, even though he had struck out 4 of the 5 batters he faced. Then they go to Yarbrough, who, all things considered, pitched well for the Dodgers. 4 1/3, 3 hits, 1 earned run, no walks, 3 strikeouts. Hard not to be impressed. So you get 5 2/3 from those 2 guys. Then Gratterall gets you 4 outs. But what did you make of the decision to start Grove, but only give him 5 batters, even though he had 4 strikeouts?
Yeah, that honestly, the entire plan was odd to me, because going back earlier last week, Dave Roberts was asked about Michael Grove, and he said, yes, he's on the roster, he's with us, but his next time pitching is not going to be as a starter. He'll be out of the bullpen. And then it was asked, okay, is that like his permanent role? Is that what he's going to be doing moving forward? And he stopped short of committing to that right now, which understandably so. He just said, that's kind of where things are at right now, and we'll see. So that, coupled with, like you said, Yarbrough being activated heading into the weekend, I assumed he would probably make the start, because also if you look at Yarbrough's numbers this season as a starter and reliever, it's very clear how he's been most effective. So Yarbrough not starting then was a surprise. And then Michael Grove starting was another surprise. And then, like you said, the plan, which I guess Dave just put that out there because Yarbrough then said in his post-game interview that he pretty much knew when he was going to be coming in.
Wow.
So that leads me to believe the plan was basically to have Michael Grove face 5 batters. Maybe if he doesn't give up the single, they let him face the 6th batter to see if he could just finish 2 innings. So the whole thing was odd, and I'm not necessarily inclined to believe that Grove came out because of an injury, his lat injury that I know we'll get into in a bit here, because I feel like, again, Yarbrough's comments after the game made it seem like this was just the plan going in. And so a little odd, but, it's not the first time we've seen the Dodgers sort of, I don't want to say be unconventional, because at this point, like, an opener isn't that big of a deal, but the pitchers specifically, how they were used, I think, is what makes this one a little bit more strange.
Now, sort of the obvious question here is, do you think the way that they handled Grove and only letting him go 5 batters, even though it seemed to be premeditated, do you feel like that there are grounds for second guessing the way that the Dodgers handled that, considering that they were 6 outs short of actually closing this one out? You had a guy who strikes out 4 out of 5 batters and then gets pulled. He's a starter. He easily could have given you 2 or 3 innings. Instead, they go quickly to Yarbrough. Do you think that can be second guessed, or, does the large portion of the pie as far as blame goes lie somewhere else?
I mean, I don't think it's fair to second guess it, I guess, is maybe my best way to answer it. It can be, because we saw what the end result was. Yeah. But obviously, if you tell Dave Roberts, hey, if you take Michael Grove out right now, this is going to happen, then he leaves him in the game.
Yeah.
We don't know, had they left Michael Grove in the game, what if he gives up a home run, right? And then who knows what the complexion is like at that point. Yeah, I believe in momentum. I know that's somewhat of a hot take out there. But yeah, I mean, I don't think the decision with Grove was fully to blame for what came with the bullpen later in the game.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, because ultimately what I'm going to say is they got to the 8th inning with a 2-run lead, and they had Almonte and Ferguson, who are guys that they have some degree of trust in. We'll get into a little bit how much trust they should have. And then Evan Phillips was available. And look, everyone's going to talk about how Evan Phillips pitched in a 5-run game the night before. And I said on Twitter, that wasn't the reason they lost. Evan Phillips was going to be ready to come into the 9th inning of that game, is my estimation. And he wasn't coming into the 8th no matter what. He's being used as a closer at this point. And so with a 3-1 lead, they needed somebody other than Evan Phillips to get them through the 8th. And that didn't happen. I don't think that had anything to do with Phillips pitching the night before. So before we get into Ferguson and Almonte, let me get your take on that piece of this as well. Do you agree that the Evan Phillips piece of this is maybe not relevant simply because of the inning we're talking about being the 8th and not the 9th?
I guess a little bit. I'm always torn on the balance of, hey, this guy hasn't pitched in a while, let's get him some work. Yeah. Like, it happened coming out of the All-Star break, right? Evan Phillips, like, there was the All-Star break, and then there were a couple games where Phillips didn't pitch, and so then they got him into a game against the Orioles. I forget if the Dodgers were up by a lot or down by a lot, but Phillips pitched, and that one was like, I think, a week or 8-ish days between appearances. Something like that I can kind of understand. If it's like 3 or 4 days, maybe even 5 in the middle of the season, heading into the Padres series, I think my preference would have been just to not pitch him in that type of situation against the A's, because then it potentially opens him up for if he needs to go 4 outs. It makes it maybe a little bit easier. That being said, I don't think they would have gone to Phillips in the 8th inning against the Padres anyway. Like you said, I think, and Dave even said in his post-game interview that, and I know fans are sort of sick of him. It's a common message he shares is, he trusted those relievers in those spots type thing. Like, the Dodgers map out matchups that they want for all of their relief pitchers. And so that's what he went to. And honestly, like, Yency Almonte, his season as a whole has obviously been inconsistent, but he was sort of on an upswing right now. And he just, lost complete command while he was out there.
Yeah. One last thing on the Phillips piece is he came into that game in the 8th inning. And so at the time it was a 7-3 game, I believe. And the Padres had just scored. So they had runners on first and second. It was 7-4, by the time Phillips came in. So it was a 3-run game. I think the bigger question is, once the Dodgers extended that to 10-4, why was he coming back out for the 9th inning? I think is a fair question. But let's get to what actually happened in that 8th inning, in the blow-up game between Almonte and Caleb Ferguson. And this is where things kind of just went absolutely haywire for the Dodgers and specifically for the bullpen. So Almonte comes in, he gives up a single gets a strikeout. Then it's walk. So you've got the bases loaded. Then you've got the ground ball to Kike Hernandez. Or excuse me, then Ferguson comes in. So it's 3-1 by the time Ferguson comes in, but it's bases loaded with 1 out. Ferguson comes in. It's the infield single that admittedly is bad luck. Kike tries to make a play, throws it to the backstop. Now all of a sudden it's 3-3. Then you've got a 2-run single. It's 5-3. At this point, Ferguson is just being left out there to die. Cronenworth single, 6-3. Single, walk, single. Finally, mercifully, Ferguson gets pulled. Alex Vesia comes in and get Ha-Seong Kim to fly out there. So when you look at the box score between those two, Almonte gets 1 out. He gives up 1 hit and 2 walks. All 3 runs end up scoring with a strikeout. Ferguson, though, was the real culprit here. He gets 1 out. He gave up 6 base runners. Technically, those runs don't count as earned. Oh, because Caleb Ferguson tried picking somebody off and threw it to the backstop. I love the pitcher error that saves you from earned runs. But Ferguson, let me ask you this. Which of those 2 guys are you more concerned about right now? Obviously, Almonte comes into tonight's game Sunday and gets 3 outs, gives up a hit. But Ferguson and Almonte, like, where are you at on those 2? Is there a guy that you feel worse about than the other?
I'm more concerned about Caleb Ferguson because I think the Dodgers need him more than they do Yency Almonte. I think they, with Joe Kelly, with Ryan Brazier, with whether Michael Grove can get healthy or it's Emmett Sheehan potentially in the bullpen. I think the Dodgers have enough ways to sort of cover up a right-handed reliever spot if Almonte just doesn't get on track the way close to pitching the way he did last season.
Yeah.
So because of that, my bigger concern is with Ferguson.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, Ferguson's numbers have been okay. Like, he had a 2.6 ERA in the month of July. But if you look at some of the underlying stuff, in 10 1/3, he allowed 17 base runners over that stretch. And so, yes, 16 strikeouts. Yes, 3 earned runs. Those are all good numbers. But it felt like he was playing with fire consistently throughout the month of July. If you go back to the end of June, even, I mean, it was 19 base runners in 11 innings allowed by Caleb Ferguson. If you extend that into the month of August now, you're at 13 1/3 innings with 28 base runners. So a whip of more than 2 over the last, dating back to his last appearance in the month of June. So that's a real, like, that's consistent. We're not talking about like one-offs there. Now, the flip side is Almonte, who I've quoted some of the numbers for. He had a stretch where he had been dominant between June 14th, in which he allowed 2 earned runs in that game. But from June 14th to July 28th, he didn't allow a run. The problem for Almonte is when the runs come, they come in bunches. A third of an inning, 3 earned the other night. Last Friday against the Reds, a third of an inning, 3 earned runs. So it just, with him, I feel like 75% of the time, maybe he's dominant. It's just the 25% of the time he's not dominant. A, you remember it. B, he's being used in big situations. So he's not giving up 3 runs when they're already down 6-2. And so, I mean, I like Yency Almonte. I like Caleb Ferguson. I've been defending both of these guys. If I had to choose, I still feel a little bit better about where Almonte is right now because I feel like, again, some nights he still has it. Ferguson, I don't feel like has had it for like a month and a half.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I think, it's tough. And this is something that has been obviously, like, the numbers, speak for themselves. It's been an ongoing issue all season. And I think, we're going to get it, not to belabor the trade deadline stuff because we covered it, ad nauseum as it was happening. And then right after it passed. But, this is the Dodgers roster. And short of, an unexpected minor league signing, somebody they could call up from Oklahoma City, or like I said, moving a starter to the bullpen, this is a group they're going to have. And so they kind of have to figure it out one way or another.
Yeah. So let's do the bullpen piece now. That feels like where we're at right now. So when you look at the Dodgers who's currently on the roster, you've got Almonte, you've got Brazier, you've got Ferguson, you've got Gratterall. Brian Hudson who was called up today for Michael Grove, Joe Kelly, Evan Phillips, Alex Vesia, and then I guess Ryan Yarbrough, although he's probably a starter now, officially with Grove to the IL. So again, that's Almonte, Brazier, Ferguson. This is just alphabetical on the roster. Gratterall, Hudson, Kelly, Phillips, Vesia. Is there enough firepower in that bullpen? You said it. I mean, it is who it is. The Dodgers, this is who the group is. Obviously, they might get Walker Buehler back. I suppose if you want to cross your fingers and toes for a JP Fireeisen or Blake Trinan or some miraculous healing of Daniel Hudson's knee or something like that. I mean, are we overreacting to a bad night that the Dodgers bullpen, two guys in particular, had? At one point, this was like the best bullpen in baseball for a month and a half stretch. Are we overreacting to a bad night, or is it justified for people to be panicking about the Dodgers bullpen? Because I think panic is the right word for what I'm seeing on social media.
Yeah, so I guess, I'll pull a Scotty here. Somewhere in the middle, there's reason to be concerned. I don't know if maybe there should be panic. There, I agree with you. That is what we're definitely seeing from a lot of fans. But there's certainly reason to be concerned because, like I said, yes, it was just one game. It was just two guys. But it's been a recurring theme for Almonte and Ferguson, if not, the bullpen sort of as a whole for much of the year. And yes, the past, 6 weeks when they did sort of turn it around, it was like, okay, this is what the front office was sort of banking on. These guys, rounding back into form, and maybe this will be who we end up seeing. I'm personally not convinced that the bullpen has enough as constructed right now. And that's why, I don't want to belabor the trade deadline stuff. We'll get into it. I'll quickly sum my thoughts up as I think the Dodgers did a good job of, the way Dave Roberts was describing things that leading up to the trade deadline was, raising the floor, raising the ceiling. I think they raised the floor with this team, and that helps. But come the postseason, I think the Dodgers needed to raise the ceiling to, truly kind of end up contending and going on a World Series run. And so that's where, I think it is justified to be a little concerned about this group of relief pitchers. But again, you put Emmett Sheehan potentially in there, if he does well, who knows? And Michael Grove, I know we're going to get into him. That could be another sort of a wild card. So that's why I don't think, maybe don't panic, but I think it's fair to be concerned.
So let's do the game. We've played this game before, but I think it's helpful to do do you trust me? Is the game that we're going to play. And I'll just list off some Dodgers relievers. And if I tell you, hey, this guy's on the postseason roster, it's the 7th, 8th, or 9th inning, and the Dodgers have a 2-run lead, do you have any degree of trust in this player coming in? All right, so that's the premise of the question. We'll start with a softball for you here, Matt. Evan Phillips. Do you trust Evan Phillips in a 2-run game in the postseason?
Yes.
Okay. Now's where it gets dicey. Immediately is when it gets dicey. Brusdar Graterol. We know the numbers. The ERA is incredible. The strikeout rate is one of the worst in baseball. Again, it's all contact, batted ball luck, depending on who you believe. Do you trust Brusdar Graterol?
I trust him more than I don't trust him, but I mean, the level of trust isn't like Evan Phillips high, but yes, I'll say yes to him.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly where I'm at. Look, the 6.65 strikeouts per 9 is terrifying with Graterol. The 1.17 ERA is great. The expected ERA is 3.2, which tells me he's limiting hard contact. So yes, he's giving up a lot of contact, but it's not hard contact. He throws so hard. He's been effective. I'm cool with Graterol. Again, do I want Graterol being like the number 2 guy in my bullpen? Probably not. But if it's the 7th inning, maybe even the 8th inning, and it's a 3-1 game in the NLCS, I don't hate it. I'll go along the same lines. Ryan Brazier. Do you trust Ryan Brazier, who's basically the same exact stat line as Brusdar Graterol? So do you trust Ryan Brazier in the 7th or 8th inning of a 2-run game?
I'll say yes, but again, it's the trust level, it's a sliding scale.
Yeah, so Brazier in 19 innings. This is crazy. In 19 innings with the Dodgers, he has a 0.95 ERA. We saw him today. Again, he throws hard. His strikeout per 9 is basically identical to Graterol's 6.63. The issue with Brazier, he's walking twice as many batters as Graterol is, 3.32. So that's not a good number in the walk category. The batting average on balls in play is 146. For his career, it's 286. So that just tells you there's a lot. Maybe I was going to say a little luck, but probably a lot of luck. But I think in the right, if it's the 7th inning, I probably don't hate it. This is a guy who's been through some wars, has had some effective seasons, even if, FIP and expected ERA haven't always loved him. He's been effective, which I think as a reliever, at some point, you just have to look and say, hey, you know what? He's confident. He throws the ball hard. He's not afraid of the moment. So we'll feel good about it. So I'm with you. To some degree, I'm going to say, yes, I trust. If this guy's in the bullpen in the playoffs, I don't hate it right now. Joe Kelly. Do you trust Joe Kelly yet, Matt?
Oh, of course.
Of course, no hesitation for the guy who's had
Dodgers
on paper a terrible year.
Dodgers legend Joe Kelly. No, but his he explained it to us in his first interview with the media. You need to look at his peripheral stats and FIP and all that stuff, and that's where he's really shining. And so yes, trust in Joe Kelly.
Wait, so just so we can be clear, did Matt Moreno just tell us to look at FIP and some of the peripheral stats, or you were quoting
I'm
Joe Kelly telling us to look at it?
I'm quoting Joe Kelly, and
But you're believing him.
I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He's a World Series champion with the Dodgers, so he gets a little bit of a benefit of the doubt here.
Okay. Kelly on paper, the 4.70 ERA is not great. The expected ERA of 3.29 is very good. I believe that might actually be better than Ryan Brazier's expected ERA. It's hard to well, I guess Brazier, because of the small sample size, I don't think he has one with the Dodgers. Let's see if it's better than Gratterall's.
And as you're looking that up, I see
The same.
Nomo FOMO. Okay, so it's the same. Nomo FOMO's commenting that Joe gives him anxiety. Our good friend Blake would just describe that as chaos, which Blake has gone on the record he is firmly a fan of. So
yeah,
I would imagine Blake is with me in the Joe Kelly camp as well.
Yeah, chaos is fun in the world of Blake Williams. So there you go. Kelly's on the fence. I mean, obviously we have seen very little. The pros for Joe Kelly are what you're saying, that there was the underlying metrics are in his favor. That's a positive. The fact, again, that nothing scares that man. I genuinely think that matters. Like, as good as you think you are, the fact, if you can not be afraid and actually in your mind believe that you are like the best guy in the world, I think that matters. So I think Joe Kelly is kind of the line for me of, do I trust you or do I not trust you? We got a super chat here from Laura, friend of the show. Is there any fear of Joe Kelly getting suspended for throwing at Tatis? If you missed this, he threw up and in on Tatis. Actually, it was a foul ball, bounced off the knob of his bat, and then Tatis started writhing around on the ground, as the Padres are known to do. Joe Kelly, not happy about it, ended up striking him out on a 100-mile-an-hour fastball that was right down the middle of the plate, kind of stared him down a little bit. And then if you want to Google Joe Kelly lip reading, there were two words back to back that were said with his back to Tatis. So my understanding is that there's no danger of a suspension here, just because it was a fastball that got away and they didn't even issue warnings, I don't think, right, Matt?
Yeah, I think he should be fine here. I guess the one sort of caveat is it happened, kind of over leading into the weekend. And so maybe MLB is, waiting until, business reopens on Monday, if you will, but I wouldn't expect a suspension.
There's been some of this, though. There was some bad blood between Machado and Gratterall again, with Machado being mad about how quickly Gratterall was getting set and the umpire was having none of it. There was a lot of just bad blood, I guess, between the Padres and the umpires more than anything else. They were complaining about the block at the plate today, that like the broadcast was like, yeah, this is pretty obvious. This is a textbook blocking of the plate. They were not happy about a balk called against Blake Snell earlier in the series. Obviously, Machado was complaining. So lots of complaining from the Padres, which, are you surprised, Matt? I'm not surprised by the antics we've seen from the folks down in San Diego.
No, it kind of reminds me of like growing up, my little brother kind of being the one who complained a lot, not me.
Yeah, I get it. So there you go. Jonathan, we got a super chat as well. Red shelling Michael Grove. Better leave him in for 6 innings. Grove on pace to strike out 25. Better pull him. Oops. Now we're one leverage guy short. I do respect this. It's like they make the guy wear it when he sucks. And as soon as he's dealing, it's like he could not have gotten out of there faster. So Jonathan, incredible super chat. Could not agree more with this take.
Yeah, that's it's unfortunate set of circumstances that Michael Grove has found himself in a few times this season.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, twice they have said to him, hey, buddy, you got to wear this one. We need to save the bullpen. And then the one night they take him out, maybe it was this weird karma situation where it's like, oh, now you want to pull me? Guess what? You're going to be 3 outs short, really, of getting the ball to Evan Phillips. And there you go. So kudos to that. And we got one more here. We appreciate the super chats. As always, if you leave us a super chat, we'll get to it right away. Otherwise, we'll save questions and answers for if we have time at the end. But Doom South says, Kike feeling right at home since being back in LA. Huge game for Hernandez today, Matt. 3 for 5 with a pair of doubles. RBI, a run, hit the one double against, at least one of the doubles was against a righty too. So not just hitting lefties, made a great backhanded play on his first play after coming in and having to play second base. So, I mean, we'll get to the rest of these guys, but Kike Hernandez has been, today in particular, was fantastic.
Yeah, I know Scott and I we were all in on the Kike trade from the beginning. I know he struggled. They didn't give up much for him, like a couple minor league guys that potentially they weren't going to pan out with the Dodgers this year. Who knows down the line? And so in my eye, like, it was a low risk, kind of high reward play. And I think from Kike's perspective, there is something to getting him back and getting him out of Boston, where I think his struggles had kind of worn on him, and understandably so. And not only being able to escape that, but coming back to a city where, one, you have already played, and two, you have the fans support immediately behind you. I was at the stadium for his first few games back, and when they announced the lineups, he has received the loudest cheers multiple nights than any player, more than Mookie Betts, more than Freddie Freeman.
He's right behind Joe Kelly in the popularity rankings, right?
He is, yeah. I will say, when Joe Kelly came in for his first appearance back after the trade, that was louder than Kike received. But yeah, both those two guys are big fan favorites.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Thank you again for the super chats, folks. We greatly appreciate it. Let me circle back to our bullpen conversation here, just so we can recap this. So Phillips, we both trust. Gratterall, we both trust. Brazier, we both trust. As far as guys that are 7th, 8th, or 9th inning guys in the postseason, you're trusting Joe Kelly. I'm on the fence with Joe Kelly. I'll go Scott Gearman style on Joe Kelly. Although if you had to push me one way or the other, I'm a peripherals guy. So give me the guy who's not afraid. So I guess just so that I'm not sitting on the fence, I'll put Joe Kelly in the trust category. Yency Almonte, yes or no, you trust him?
I guess more yes than no, but again, like, these are hard. Like, for me, there's nuance to them, but kind of how you just said, if you need to push me one way or the other, I'll still say yes. And with the caveat of under the right circumstances.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we all know I'm going to die on the Yency Almonte hill this year. I've had the guys back, and there's nothing phasing me now. So give me Yency Almonte with a nice little bounce back today, finding the strike zone. So I'm going to say yes. Caleb Ferguson, do you trust him?
I mean, I'm going to answer this. I'm going to end up shooting my own argument, shooting myself in the foot for my own argument. I trust him enough.
Yeah. See, for me, the last month plus, and this is a guy I've defended immensely, but this is extended. Like, for whatever reason, if you give me one blow up every 2 weeks, I can sort of tolerate that, i.e. Yency Almonte. Ferguson, I mean, I just said over his last basically 40 days has a whip of 2. He's allowing 2 base runners per inning over the last 40 days. He's been playing with fire, and to me, Ferguson's on the no list. I hope he can get himself back to yes, but right now he's on the no list for me. I mean, we don't have to go through everybody else here. I guess the only other name that maybe is worth talking about is Alex Vesia, who's had himself kind of a nice little run of games here. Where are you at on Alex Vesia?
I mean, I feel like if I trust Ferguson and I trust Almonte, it's not necessarily fair to say I don't trust Vesia.
Yeah.
So I'll say I trust him as well, but I guess the caveat to all this is, and I saw it in one of the comments, the bullpen is sort of Jekyll and Hyde, and that is my concern. Like, I could trust, Gratterall, and he could try to, field his position aggressively and throw the ball into right field, and then all of a sudden his appearance is just completely shot.
Yeah.
I'll trust Vesia, but my trust level collectively in the bullpen is just not very high, I guess.
So since July and August, Vesia has 12 1/3 innings. He has allowed just 7 base runners in 12 1/3. He has 16 strikeouts, and he's allowed 3 earned runs. So if you want to talk about 2 guys whose seasons are basically completely inverted, Vesia, unbelievably bad for the first half of the season, up and down multiple times. Caleb Ferguson started out really, really good. The last 40 days, those guys are headed in different directions, and it feels crazy to me, but I actually think Vesia I would trust more in a spot. Now, to be clear, Vesia has not been placed in the high leverage situations that Caleb Ferguson has, but I think I just look at base runners. Like, if you give up base runners, you're going to give up runs eventually. It's kind of like if you give up contact, eventually it's going to land for a hit. As weird as it sounds, I would trust Vesia more than Ferguson, I probably still need a tad more before I actually trust him, though. Both those guys are on the no side of the ledger. So basically, at best, if you want to trust Phillips, if you want to trust Gratterall, if you want to trust Brazier, I'm sure most people would probably agree with those three. Then you've got Almonte and Ferguson in the maybe category. I've said all along, Matt, and this is where I'll land the plane on the bullpen, that the solution here is when the Dodgers need to limit this to let's say 3.5 starting pitchers come postseason time. Let's just hypothetically say that's Kershaw, who's healthy. We'll get to his health update in a minute. That's Julio Urias, who's had a bit of a bounce back. That's Tony Gonsolin, and that's Bobby Miller. Let's just say those are your 4 guys that you're pitching in the postseason. Now, all of a sudden, to the list that we just talked through, it's Emmett Sheehan, it's Michael Grove, it's Ryan Pepio, it's Ryan Yarbrough. Like, all of a sudden, you start adding a bunch of other arms out there as possibilities. And I've said all along, I think the Dodgers bullpen will actually be better in the postseason than it will in the regular season for that reason. I think we've seen Grove be effective in shorter stints. You know, that's probably why he was so effective the other night, is because they said, hey, throw the crap out of the baseball for 2 innings and, you know, we'll take it. To Sheehan, who gets the 4-inning save the other night. Like, we've seen these guys actually be effective in those places. And yes, Joe Kelly was another name that I didn't mention. Lance Lynn, you know, who knows? He might be the Dodgers' #1 starter. We're going to get to him in a moment.
I was wondering about your starting rotation, picking Lynn over Gonsolin.
I mean, we're saving him for the World Series, so we're just putting the arm on ice so that we make sure he might throw every day for us in the World Series. But my point is, you start moving. I mean, because if Lance Lynn's in there, then Bobby Miller's going to the bullpen, or Tony Gonsolin's going to the bullpen. And I think either one of those guys would immediately become a bullpen arm that I actually did feel reasonably well about. So my point is, I think the Dodgers bullpen, it might be a struggle for the next month or so as we finish out this regular season, 2 months. I guess we're sitting here in the beginning of August. So 2 months, I think it might not be perfect and it might not be pretty, but if they can find 4 or 5 true relievers that they trust and then throw a bunch of starting pitching depth arms that can throw upper 90s in there, I think they might be able to patch this together come the postseason.
Yeah, I won't completely disagree with that. My concern will be, is that capable of like getting pieced? Like, on paper, it sounds great and it looks like it should work, but in functionality, will it end up panning out? That's my concern. And I would feel, better if, there was maybe already off the bat, like 3 relief pitchers that we said, yes, you absolutely trust, right? Like, Evan Phillips is pretty much the only one that's absolute yes. The other guys, it's like yes, but. Yeah. And so that's my concern. Can the bullpen perform well enough? Sure. Will they? I'm not completely sold because I haven't seen enough consistency from the guys who are already in there. And then I don't necessarily, as much as maybe Tony Gonsolin and Michael Grove profile as guys who should pitch well out of the bullpen, if it's just in 2-3 inning spurts, who knows how that'll actually unfold. Last time we saw it with Gonsolin in the playoffs, and granted he was younger and a little bit more inexperienced, it wasn't a great showing. And so maybe he just can't handle that type of role for whatever reason.
Yeah, I agree. And again, this is who they've got. So we're going to find out one way or the other. There's not going to be like, well, this happened and everything changed. So they hope that they can learn to trust Almonte Ferguson, Vesia, Joe Kelly, like those 4 guys can 2 of those or 3 of those kind of right the ship and be consistent for them. If the answer is yes, then they might have something once you get the starters mixed in there. Let's switch gears a little bit here, Matt. And let's talk trade deadline acquisitions, because the Dodgers got absolutely destroyed for how they handled the deadline by me, among other people. And yet you look at Lance Lynn, who's now got 13 innings pitched for the Dodgers and has allowed 4 earned runs. He's given them 6+ innings in both of those starts. Today, he allowed 6 base runners in 6 innings while striking out 6. He threw 96 pitches. Yes, it was another home run. Yes, it was a monster. Yes, he has allowed 4 home runs in 2 games, but the guy's just getting the job done. Amed Rosario had the 2-run home run that got things kicked off today. I believe he has 9 RBIs in 7 games since coming over to the Dodgers. Is batting cleanup, looks at home there, has played reasonably well, totally fine at second base, which is a position he's never played. You've got Kike Hernandez, who's 3 for 5 with 2 doubles. Joe Kelly is atop your reliever rankings apparently already. And so Ryan Yarbrough gives you 4 1/3 of 1 earned against the Padres in San Diego the other day. I mean, like, everything Andrew Friedman did at the deadline, I'm not saying was perfect, but he's got to be sort of laughing in his office somewhere and saying nowhere in his wildest dreams did he imagine it would go this well for the first week.
Yeah, I think it's rare that, every new acquisition has basically contributed right off the bat.
Yeah.
And frankly, the Dodgers have needed it. And if Lance Lynn had kind of struggled in either one of his starts, that would have been, kind of not great for the team, considering how much the big thing with Lance Lynn was, he's given a bunch of home runs, but at the very least he'll eat innings for you, right? And so if he wasn't necessarily doing that, that would have been a problem. But yeah, I think, like I said earlier, it's what happened at the trade deadline, and obviously the Eduardo Rodriguez stuff is a huge wild card. And we did our video on it with Daniel last week, and there's blame kind of to be shared all around. I still feel that, yes, you could argue that the Dodgers, did raise the floor, which, needed to be done with a team, but I'm not sure I think they still needed to raise the ceiling as well. And I just wonder if once we get to the postseason, is that where, maybe not having another, whether a number one, I mean, there really weren't aces available on the market this year. So let's call it a very good number two starter. Will that end up catching up with them? Who knows? In terms of talent and potential, Julio, there's no denying what he can. We've seen it already. Yeah. It's just a matter of if he's going to get there.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, I would push back a little bit on the floor ceiling thing from the perspective of, I actually think what they needed was floor raisers, because what I think these guys have already started to do is dramatic might be a strong word. They've increased the Dodgers' ability to win regular season games over the stretch that we've seen so far. And what I mean by that is they're helping the Dodgers extend the lead. I think those guys all increase the Dodgers' odds of winning the National League West, because now when they face a lefty and you give them a sample size of 60 games, Rosario and Kiké in the lineup against lefties is going to up the odds of winning those games, and even if it's just 2 or 3 games, that's a floor raiser. But if the Dodgers win the NL West and we can look back and say, hey, you know what? Those 5 guys helped the Dodgers win the NL West. I think that's absolutely critical, because it avoids the wild card game and it gives them some breathing room there. And secondly, I've said this, and it's kind of, I haven't heard anybody else make this case, which might mean I'm an idiot, but I actually think this Dodgers roster in a very strange way is better prepared for the postseason than they are the regular season. In some ways, I think a lot of the deficiencies we see with this group in the regular season will actually be dealt with in the postseason. What do I mean? I mean that right now we're all complaining the Dodgers can't find 5 starting pitchers. Well, guess what? When you get to the postseason, you just need 3.5, and 3.5 is a lot easier to find than 5. And, the Dodgers bullpen is a mess. Well, guess what? When you only have to trim it down to 3.5 starting pitchers, a couple of those hard throwing younger guys like Bobby Miller, Michael Grove, Emmett Sheehan, those guys could become real weapons in the bullpen, guys that you can trust. You can patch together bullpen games however you need to do it. But I think that unit is improved once some of those guys aren't relied upon as starters. And as far as the lineup goes, now whether you get a righty or a lefty, you feel like you've got platoon splits against both. You can throw all your lefties in the outfield against a righty. You can throw Kiké and Amed Rosario in against lefties. And all of a sudden, I think you've got lineups that you feel good about. So yes, it raises the floor, but I would actually argue, Matt, that was more what was needed, because it gets them to an NL West title, hopefully. And if they do that, then it's just a roll of the dice anyways. And I actually think the team could be better prepared for that moment anyways.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And, it does sort of remind me a little bit of 2018 when the Dodgers ran, extreme platoons and, their postseason games. I think the talent with this group is better than when they tried to do it back then. And so maybe, that team still got to the World Series. And so, maybe this one, if it has better talent, will be able to do the same thing. Then we'll kind of see. I still think my viewpoint in general, whether it's this season or other seasons, give me as much talent as possible. I want a bunch of all-stars on the team. If it means I'll take more talent than not having it. Now, I think that being said, that the Dodgers do a good job of not just getting talented guys who are then lazy, because I do agree that what's the old adage, hard work beats talent or whatever, right? You don't want a lazy, talented guy. And I don't think the Dodgers have had that.
Yeah.
But that's just my concern is, I hope, again, I think the more upper echelon talent you have, the maybe greater margin for error you might have, because Freddie Freeman could go on a run all of a sudden, or maybe if you added, again, there weren't really aces available, but a very good number 2 pitcher, maybe he gets, on a roll and wins you a bunch of games type thing. And so that's kind of my line of thinking there. But you make a great point in terms of how they've constructed the roster. Like they can handle, whether it's a righty or lefty. And so at that point, it'll just be a matter of players performing or not. And I know that fans don't like to see that. It's always, Dave Roberts who's up there striking out and whatnot. But, time will tell. There's plenty of baseball to be played before we even get there.
Let's do rapid fire buying or selling, what we've seen from these deadline guys so far. I'll start with Amed Rosario. Buying or selling what we've seen from him as being to some degree sustainable.
I'm buying it. I think he'll help by basically being fit into a reduced role than what he's sort of used to with the Guardians, but a better role for him moving forward.
It's just so sad we had to give up so much to get Amed Rosario. Oh, no, wait, never mind. That was Noah Syndergaard trade. I mean, Rosario has been great against lefties his entire career. The Dodgers are just going to play him against lefties. What a novel idea. So I'm buying the crap out of that one. Lance Lynn, 13 innings, 4 earned runs, 4 solo home runs, struck out a bunch of guys, is eating innings just as promised, has been on the receiving end of multiple blowouts so far. But are you buying Lance Lynn as a positive addition and being able to, like I say, the bar is if he's a 4.5 ERA guy, are you buying that? Do you think he can be a 4.5 ERA guy for the Dodgers?
Yeah, I'll buy that. I'm a little worried that at some point the solo home runs might turn into a 2-run, a 3-run that's here or there, and that changes how he sort of looks. But I'll buy him as a.
Yeah, no, come on. Lance Lynn, he gets out of jams when he needs to. He throws his fastballs down the middle when he knows he's just trying to, challenge guys and they got a big one. But yeah, look, I've loved the Lance Lynn experience so far. I'm sure it'll be terrifying once we're in a close game. But look, he has as advertised, and when I defended this trade, it was he's going to eat innings, 13 innings and 2 outings. Yes, he's given up the home runs, but he's limited damage. So like I said a week ago, you're not allowed to complain about Lance Lynn because all we do is complain about bad starting pitching. We have not gotten bad starting pitching from him. Kike Hernandez, I think I already know the answer to this one.
I think there'll be a little bit more regression with Kike than Rosario because I'm not sure if he'll continue hitting right-handers it's been minimal opportunities so far, but as well as he sort of has with the Dodgers. But I'll still buy him as a positive addition to the team.
Yeah, I think I'm buying Kike Hernandez as an upgrade over Yanni Hernandez. Shout out to our guy Blake. But I'm with you. If I had to pick one of those 3 to regress, Kike would quickly be the guy that I would, because I just think Rosario has never wavered in being able to hit lefties. Like Kike is still in the midst of a bad year. So there's at least some seeds of doubt that can be placed there. Joe Kelly, we've already talked about. It sounds like you're buying the Joe Kelly experience. And then Ryan Yarbrough's the last one here. We've only seen him once, but it was 4 1/3. It wasn't, we've seen more of him than we've seen of Joe Kelly. Are you buying Ryan Yarbrough as the Dodgers number 5 starter here for the next few weeks?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't know if that will end up being his actual role, but I'll buy him as being able.
Let me ask you this: do you think Ryan Yarbrough's on the playoff roster?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think all these guys are. I don't think they make these trades without it. And what'll happen, because I think what we're going to see in the postseason is whether Yarbrough, I don't know if Yarbrough will start. I think the Dodgers, we've seen them do it in the past where they have an opener in the playoffs. And so I think that's what they'll end up doing. Gratterall will be an opener one day, and then Yarbrough will follow him. Yeah. So I think he adds too much versatility to not include him on the postseason roster.
Yeah. And he would give them, right now, what is it? It's just Vesia, Ferguson, and him as the only 3 lefties that they've got in the pen, right? So, yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, I just wonder, is he really going to beat out the Groves, Sheehan, Pepio group? Like, are they going to send any of those guys home before they send Yarbrough home?
I think, the Grove injury, we're going to have to see how serious it is. I mean, if it's a lat, that could linger for a while, and that could unfortunately be the answer. Sheehan, maybe they don't necessarily feel that he's actually ready for a bullpen role in the postseason. I mean, I know he did okay. He handled it. I don't want to say he just did okay. He did well in his first time doing it, but then he got optioned right away to Oklahoma City, so it's going to be a little bit before we see him back. But yeah, I think Yarbrough is on, and honestly, I think they'll only maybe end up taking 2 of 3 with Vesia, Ferguson, and Yarbrough in terms of lefties. But also, some of this is hard to say now because they can change it depending every series, and so depending on who they're playing.
Yeah, let's talk injuries. You mentioned the Grove one. As you say that, Sheehan was optioned. It was interesting. They had a chance to bring Sheehan back up because of the injury to Grove, and obviously he wouldn't have helped them from a bullpen perspective. They end up going with Brian Hudson, who was an arm that was available if they needed it. But it's just interesting because they could have brought Sheehan up to do the exact same thing that Grove was going to do, which was basically be a piggyback to Ryan Yarbrough. So kind of interesting to me that they opted not to go that route. Anyways, just thinking out loud. Let's talk Grove injury. So he pitches, everything seems fine. Again, everyone says that was the plan all along. Today he goes on the injured list with a lat injury. You pointed, I mean, that's not what you want to hear. It's like lats and obliques feel like whatever you think it is, add 2 to 4 weeks on top of that. Have we heard anything, gotten any sense of how serious this is with Michael Grove going to the injured list?
Yeah, nothing yet, unfortunately. I think part of it is the Dave Roberts, when he was speaking with media before tonight's game, he said that Grove was going to be going on the IL with some lat trouble. I didn't see anybody necessarily reporting any sort of estimated timeline or Dave Roberts even giving one. It's kind of hard. That's the downside to these national exclusive broadcasts, is that Spectrum isn't there with their camera, and so there's no pregame or postgame show that we can watch on Sportsnet LA when we're not at the games. But honestly, my guess would be it's probably at least 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah,
maybe that might be concerned. And it's one of those things where, he could start feeling okay, and then he starts throwing, and then there's potentially some lingering pain. I mean, we saw it with Ryan Pepio. He made his start in the exhibition Freeway Series. It was his final tune-up. He was supposed to be on the opening day roster, and then boom, comes in the next day. His oblique is acting up. He thinks it's only going to be, 3 days before he starts throwing, and he just got activated off the 60-day injured list, and now he's still, sort of building up in OKC.
Yeah. I love how you're like, we didn't get an update from Dave. And I'm like, well, so did Dave say something and we didn't get any update that we can trust? No. Oh, no, he just didn't say anything. Not like we could have trusted him if he told us anything about the Michael Grove injury. So I think that's one to watch. I'm sure, to your point, once they return back home and there's a little bit more media access, I'm guessing we'll get, I was going to say more information. We're going to get quotes from Dave, whether that's more or less information. I'll leave that up to the other folks. Let's talk Kershaw, though. Through another bullpen, I believe today. So what's the latest on Kershaw? Some saying Thursday against the Rockies, he might be back.
Yeah. So the way it was sort of setting up heading into the weekend was he was going to throw a bullpen session at some point in San Diego, and then I thought he would return against the Diamondbacks. But if you look at Kershaw's history, he's a guy who starts 3 days after his bullpen session. So if you factor that in, then that pushes him into not returning until Thursday against the Rockies, I believe.
Yeah, that's what Twitter was saying.
Yeah, so then I guess when you looked at it from that standpoint, it does make sense from the sense of Kershaw historically has not necessarily always pitched very well at Chase Field. And so maybe they just don't want that to be his first time back. Maybe they just want to give him the extra rest. His throwing schedule has been a little strange, because I know I mentioned it to you in the past. His second simulated game came 4 days after he had last faced batters, which is quote unquote short rest, which I thought was kind of odd. So I'm not 100% sure, but definitely some point this middle of this week, whether it's Wednesday or Thursday, Kershaw should be back.
Home game against the Rockies is a nice little soft landing spot. Post trade deadline Rockies after they send a couple of their decent players out. So we don't hate that. But overall good news. Basically, as long as there's nothing negative coming out of these bullpens and the momentum points to him returning later this week, but you're pausing there. So go ahead.
Yeah. I'll remind you of Dave Roberts last week saying, Kershaw's shoulder, he's pain-free, but basically he's not healthy, was what Dave Roberts alluded to. He was very vague. He said Kershaw could provide more details, which to my knowledge, I hadn't really seen Kershaw during the homestand after Dave made those comments. I don't know if anybody's asked him about it since. Kershaw in general is not one to offer up a bunch of details about his injuries anyway, so I don't think it would go anywhere. But that is something to sort of be a little concerned about.
I believe nothing that Dave Roberts says about injuries. So whether it's positive or negative, if I'm not going to apply any of my belief to his positive statements about injuries, I'm definitely not believing the negative either. So you can say that. Ardaya 5 hours ago said Kershaw, yeah, we'll return sometime this week. TBD if it's Arizona or home against the Rockies. Toribio clarified that it was, quote, it's likely that he will return this week, Dave Roberts. So maybe that's the massive grain of salt that we all needed to have there. So let's get to a couple odds and ends things, and then we'll get to some questions. Again, we appreciate everybody that's joining us here. Another big crowd. So thank you for hopping in. Some odds and ends here. Before we get to odds and ends, let's talk Austin Barnes real quick, Matt. I know you were waiting for this moment. Some people were pissed off that it's now taken till the 57-minute mark. I'll say this: first and third, 1 out. I believe it was the second inning when this all took place, and Austin Barnes comes up, and my immediate response, I tweeted it, was, please bunt. What does Austin Barnes do? He bunts because they're trying to avoid the double play, lays down a great bunt, RBI bunt, play at the plate, again, gets overruled. It's safe. Barnes is on first. I believe he finished the game 1 for 2 with a walk and a sack bunt. So hit the ball hard as well. Let me look up some StatCast numbers for you here, Matt. But the EV on our guy Barnes, I would say as loud. We got 104.2 off the bat on a ground out, 101.2 on his single, 35 on the sack bunt, in case you were wondering. So I tweeted the OPS was up above 360 there for a minute until that out at the end, which was tragic. Back below 360, the vaunted 360 OPS mark that we try and stay above. But I've got to give my guy Austin Barnes, your guy Austin Barnes. I know how you've died on the Austin Barnes hill. You've had his back all along, defended him to the death, and so this is a good day for you, Matt.
Yeah, 4-game hitting streak, big involved in a big play. Like, fundamental baseball, it wins games. Like, there's just no denying that. And so we see it, across the league where players can't get bunts down, and Barnes got the perfect one down to get Kike in from third base, and called a great game behind the plate. Got Lance Lynn through another good start. The bullpen, Barnes is so back. I see the comments. Just Barnesy had himself a day today in San Diego. It was great to see.
So I'll ask you the question that you would ask me if the roles were reversed: is Austin Barnes back, Matt?
Not yet. I need a couple more. Let's see him get his hitting streak up to 5 or 6 games, and then we'll be ready to declare him back at that point.
Do you agree with EB that he should be bunting every at bat?
No, not every at bat. Only certain situations.
Okay, there you go. The other odds and ends here, Michael Busch. We know he's been hot because everybody who's pissed off about him not playing. Although JD Martinez coming back defended the decision not to put him on the injured list. Max Muncy still has not played for a couple days. But talk to us about the week that Michael Busch had.
Yeah, so he was named, I don't have all the stats off me offhand. I know he was named Pacific Coast League Player of the Week recently. I think it was for the end of July. And then he was also named Pacific Coast League Player of the Month for July. And he's basically, to sum it all up for you guys, he's been hitting a bunch of home runs in almost every game, it feels like. I think his OPS is still over 1,000 down there. And yeah, he's just having a strong season. And I was... Obviously, nothing really came out. The Dodgers were, reportedly made a trade offer to the Mets for Scherzer. They obviously were involved for Verlander. They had an agreement for Rodriguez. My guess is Busch probably was getting traded in those scenarios, but nothing has ever come out about who the Dodgers were parting with. But other than that, I think it was a little odd that they kept him. Just because he doesn't seem to fit on the roster. But, if on one hand, I feel like obviously JD Martinez is signed to a 1-year contract, I wouldn't necessarily bet on him being back. And so then you think, okay, the Dodgers could have Busch be their DH, but then also, there's this whole narrative of them going after Ohtani in the offseason. And obviously, if you do that, Ohtani needs to DH as well. And so then Busch still won't have a spot on the roster. And so I just wonder if the Dodgers maybe missed the boat to sell at, his highest value.
Just looking at his numbers, in 24 games in the month of July, he had 11 home runs, an OPS over 1,100. He struck out just 22 times, 17 walks, 33 hits. So, safe to say. And by the way, on that front, Gavin Stone, at one point, one of the Dodgers' top pitching prospects, he might have fallen down, but He threw 6 no-hit innings with 2 walks and 10 strikeouts on Friday for the Dodgers. So more good news there. I mean, Gavin Stone's one of those guys that I'm not saying he's going to make an impact this season, although you never know if he turns things around. There's guys that, I mean, he was the first one called up. Everybody forgets that. Like Michael Grove was number 1, but Stone was ahead of Bobby Miller. He was ahead of Emmett Sheehan as far as guys that they were trying to call up. And so good news there. Cole Calhoun traded away. That was one other sort of random note from the Dodgers. I don't know. This one didn't even cross my radar. I'm going to be perfectly honest, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the only Cole Calhoun is a former major leaguer. And so when they signed him, I thought at some point he would be up. I mean, look, they gave Jake Marisnick some time on the active roster and before he ended up getting hurt. So I thought Calhoun would probably get a crack at some point, but, didn't come to be. Dodgers also traded a couple prospects who I think were playing on the ACL team to the White Sox for international bonus money. And I forget the name, but there's some, I think, Japanese pitcher who's some young kid who's speculated, I think, as potentially coming to the majors. And so the Dodgers could be involved for him. But also if he does that, it would be a similar situation like Ohtani with the posting rules where he can't necessarily, his potential earnings are capped initially because of his age and experience. So I don't know if it's fully been decided yet if he'll wait so that he can be older and then literally have an open market, or if he'll try making the jump this winter.
Yeah, I believe the report that came out today was that he's the number 1 projected pick and that he is expected to come over. So, but he's a pitcher. And so everybody immediately assumes that the Dodgers will and should be interested. And I'm not here to say any of them are wrong on that front. I was trying to see if I could find it, but if you've got any questions for us, throw those in the all caps questions in the chat. That would be great. We'll look through those and answer some of those as best we can. So yeah, throw that. And if somebody's got the note on the pitcher that can easily have that accessible, please let us know. There were 3 guys. Oh yeah, here we go. This is a great question. EB, I'm glad you asked this. We're talking Jose Ramirez versus Tim Anderson. I'll let you go first, Matt. Your thoughts.
I mean, I don't like Ramirez was like falling back as he was throwing the puck. Like, I don't know. It was a strange, first of all, I don't know what caused it. Like I watched the play and it was a little weird slide. What I will say was funny was the umpire, like he kind of like was getting in between them. And then he saw, I think Anderson throw his glove down and he thought, okay, like I'm backing out of the way. Like you guys can just do whatever you're about to do. But yeah, I wasn't hit by the punch, so I don't want to pass too much judgment, but the optics of it aren't great for Tim Anderson. And then on Twitter, like I saw his tweets today just made it even more strange.
Yeah. Tim Anderson, he does not have like the best rep, I would say, around the league. The fact that he's been awful this year has not helped. Jose Ramirez on the flip side, basically the exact opposite. Literally everybody loves this guy and he's amazing. And so the two of them get into it. Anderson's going to get none of the benefit of the doubt. I had a guy on Twitter coming at me for defending Ramirez. And I was like, Anderson's the one who squared up first. And Anderson's the guy who swung first as well. He missed. Ramirez, I'm with you. It didn't look like the strongest punch. It was kind of a wraparound. But clearly, once you got the second angle, Anderson was knocked woozy. He was knocked off of his feet, stumbles back, falls down. But then there was another angle I saw today of him walking off the field, and he was basically being carried off of the field. And so, to your point, it may not have looked perfect, but clearly it accomplished what it intended to accomplish. So L's all around for Tim Anderson, I would say, on this one. Better than the Odor punch of Batista. I mean, I would say maybe just because, like, people don't seem to like Tim Anderson and the impact of the punch, even if less. Odor's was like clean, but it didn't have the impact. So, I mean, would you rather have a better looking punch that is less effective or a worse looking punch that accomplishes what you're hoping it would?
No, I think Odor's was pretty good because it sent, if I remember correctly, it sent his glasses flying off because we tweeted a picture of it saying, and I said, we need the exit velocity on his glasses. And somebody actually replied to us saying like, oh, like my physics professor or something like studied the video and this is what it was. Like it was, I'll have to find it. It was crazy. So I'll go with the Odor one.
Okay, there you go. And to correct what we were just saying about the international signing, by the way, I'm not going to pronounce this name because I would do it in not do it justice, but it's a teenager from Korea who will be skipping the KBO draft and instead will pursue the MLB route. He's expected to sign with the club this offseason during the next international free agency period. So Future Dodgers was tweeting about this. Our guy Justin Lorber saying it's worth noting that he's reportedly waiting until the next international signing period. So that's what's interesting because he falls under the international free agency piece of this. So I believe it is slightly different than the Ohtani thing because each team has a specific budget of international money. So the Dodgers going out and acquiring that, I think it is a little bit different. Again, this is uncharted territory for me, but I don't think it's as simple as a posting fee in the same way because he doesn't have a KBO team. He hasn't entered the KBO draft yet.
But
Does this sound familiar?
Yeah, I'd have to double. I always forget because, and also the rules changed. I think a few years ago.
Yeah.
What impacts it is the player's age and experience. I think.
Yeah.
And so because he's young, he's as young as he is, and I apologize for getting it wrong. I think I said from Japan. Because he's as young as he is, he can't there's a limit on how much he can. It's not like a free for all. So the Dodgers can't say, "Hey, we'll pay you the most money." So it actually puts the Dodgers at a disadvantage, similar to with Ohtani, like they were capped in what they could do. And I apologize for not having a more coherent answer for you guys, but those rules have changed and they're detailed and complex. And so, I can tell you that if and when we write about this player, it'll all be explained there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So stay tuned there. Oh, here we go. Food question. Great stuff. Orange chicken, sweet and sour pork, or broccoli beef, Matt?
Oh, great question. So
give me your rankings.
Oh, it's orange chicken, and I don't even need the other two. Orange chicken from Panda Express is hands down the best orange chicken ever.
I agree. It's elite.
Yeah.
I've got broccoli beef second. I really like broccoli beef, and I really like sweet and sour pork. So this is you can't really you're not losing in any of these three scenarios, but I'm with you. Orange chicken is an easy number one for me there. Okay,
maybe that's where I'll go have dinner tonight after we get off this.
Oh, sounds good. Sounds good. David wants to know, do you guys like the new schedule, less divisional games? How do you feel about that?
I think it's okay. I think for the fans, it's good to be able to see, every team. And obviously it doesn't necessarily always mean a home game for the Dodgers in that sense, but you could turn them on and see them play, an opponent that maybe they wouldn't if it wasn't the right year. But I also sort of like the novelty of, let's say the Dodgers and Yankees make it to the World Series and they haven't played each other at all that season. Like the first meeting coming in the World Series, I think is kind of cool to me too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like more divisional games. It also happens to be typically better for the Dodgers when you get to play some extra games against the Rockies. Although the Padres are in second to last. So, maybe this is the year for them to have changed it, which is good. But yeah, look, Dodgers are 4 games up. I've got no complaints. That's my short answer there. Scott Gearman, gritty Dodgers win. Your thoughts, Matt?
I don't know if I would classify this one as gritty because when you take an early lead and basically hang on, I think it's a solid win. It's a good win. To me, gritty is if they really had to grind one out, maybe come from behind type thing. So I'm not going gritty on this one.
Sack bunt. The suicide squeeze is I think where we get close to gritty.
That's fair. That is fair. Gritty play. I'll give him that.
Michael wants to know, Jeff, Austin Barnes is heating up. Would you play Barnes more so that Will Smith could get some rest? Will Smith, I looked this up today. He's 10th in the league in innings caught. And I think he's 15th in games played among catchers. So the discrepancy there is that shows you he would be getting more games played via designated hitter if that was an option. Would you play Barnes more so that Will Smith can get some rest? If the division lead gets to double digits, yes. Until then, Austin Barnes does not help them win games 19 out of the 20 times he plays. So no is my short answer. And Matt, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Will Smith, the rest stuff, I know that became a comment. I don't want to say narrative that took hold, but that's what everybody started pointing to as he's been sort of struggling a bit recently. I don't know if that's necessarily to blame. Dave Roberts wasn't convinced that that's the reason why. And frankly, if Austin Barnes starts more games than it definitely will make things a little, as much, even though he is on a 4-game hitting streak, had a big day today, it would make things a little bit more difficult on the Dodgers.
I believe this is his first RBI today since June, the middle of June. So we're going here. First of all, we had a Scott Gearman comment that said, "Oh no," I believe in response to the orange chicken question. So I'm slightly nervous about his thoughts on that one. But Joe has this to say: Trader Joe's orange chicken is way better than Panda. And I'm going to just start this one. People told me how great Trader Joe's orange chicken is. I think it's like the definition of mid. I'm not interested at all in Trader Joe's orange chicken. So there's my take, Matt.
Yeah, I'm not going to be either, just from the standpoint of I've had also like orange chicken from other, like from restaurants that is purportedly better than Panda Express, and it hasn't been. And I also recently had I think the hash browns. Trader Joe's has like some hash browns that are
the hash brown patties are actually solid. I'll buy those.
I thought it was just like a soggy like hash brown thing. Like I'd rather go to McDonald's and get
You throw it in the microwave. What'd you do? Throw it in the microwave?
No, it was in the oven.
Okay. Yeah, I threw mine in the air fryer. I'm famous breakfast sandwiches over here. Talked my daughter into it. We got a fried egg, American cheese, and a hash brown patty all in the. But here's the secret, Matt. The bread is so critical here. What I found to be the best breakfast sandwich bread. This is going to surprise you. You ready for this? Hamburger buns. It's a great breakfast sandwich bun. It's nice and soft, good size. So there you go.
That's interesting. I'm a little bit more partial to a bagel or like an English muffin.
Yeah, look, I like both of those things. The hamburger bun, for whatever reason, it's sturdier, it's bigger, it's softer. So look, breakfast sandwiches, egg, cheese, meat, and bread. Like I'm in no matter what. Here, we'll do this. Bob Nightingale has a food question, then we'll get to a couple baseball ones and be done here. What's your in and out order? I'll go first. This is the one slight zag I take is, rather than a double, I prefer 2 cheeseburgers. I like the portion sizes we've got with all the lettuce, tomato, all that kind of stuff. So 2 cheeseburgers, fries, medium well, with like 8 packets of spread to dip my fries in. That's my order. Oh, animal style, obviously. Animal style, no pickles.
I'll do I'm a big 3x4 guy. I need the extra cheese on it. Some fries and a pink lemonade.
Pink lemonade. Yeah, I just go an unsweetened iced tea with the lemon. So solid lemons there, though. Okay, couple baseball questions. Hallelujah. Should the Dodgers extend Rosario or use Miguel Vargas at second base? I actually had the thought today that I think Rosario sticking around would not surprise me, because they've always struggled to find someone who could play against lefties. He clearly hits exceptionally well there. They've moved him to second base where he's been competent. I would not want Rosario as an everyday guy, but in sort of that pay $5 or $6 million more than they've been paying for Hanser Alberto and Yanni Hernandez, and let Rosario play a little short, a little second, maybe teach him some outfield stuff. I wouldn't hate it. I still think Miguel Vargas is your second baseman on opening day next year, though.
Yeah, that could definitely work. I think obviously that would require Rosario being open to that type of role. And frankly, I think if he sees he's on a winning team and, they are using him that in a way where he's highlighted his strengths are, on display, my guess is he would be open to it, short of maybe some other team coming in with just an absolutely like huge monster offer for whatever, or at least significantly more than what the Dodgers would be willing to pay. But yeah, it makes sense. And I agree. I think Vargas, as much as he sort of struggled in his opportunity this season, the Dodgers aren't going to give up on him. And don't forget also, the infield next season should have Gavin Lux part of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the part that I always try and remind people of is that exactly that. Like Lux is coming back and who knows where he ends up playing, but Rosario is a free agent. He's in the final year of arbitration this year. So something to keep an eye on there. So there you go. Well, folks, we appreciate you joining us again. As always, this is Dodger Heads Live. Make sure you check out DodgerBlue.com for all the latest. If you're a social media person, Dodger Blue 1958 everywhere. If you're a podcast person, I've been plugging this hard for the last few weeks. It's something we just started doing this season. So search for us, Google, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your podcast, search for Dodger Heads. We'd greatly appreciate if you'd subscribe, follow, whatever they call it on that site. Rate, review, comment, all that stuff is greatly appreciated. Of course, on YouTube here, subscribe and ring the notification bell as well. That is Matthew Moreno. My name is Jeff Spiegel. Dodgers have taken 2 out of 3 against the Padres, but have a weird one. Monday day game, Tony Gonsolin on the mound for the Dodgers. So keep an eye on that for tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day. And as always, go Dodgers.